한국의 롯데월드타워처럼 북한에도 유경호텔 같은 고층 빌딩이 존재합니다. 북한의 맞춤룰을 떠받치는 것은 콘크리트와 철근만은 아니죠. 돌격대라고 불리는 청년층의 동원과 노력도 있습니다. 북한이 한국보다 일찍이 계획도시를 만들어 왔다는 사실은 우리에게 잘 알려져 있지 않습니다. 1970년대까지만 해도 북한은 한국보다 세련된 외양의 고층 건물들을 많이 지었습니다. 한국이 주택난 해소를 위해 신도시를 만드는 것처럼 북한도 도시계획에 따라 건설을 꾸준히 진행해왔죠. 물론 그 성과는 다소 부족해 보입니다. 북한은 도시를 짓는 방식으로 주민의 삶을 조직하고 통제해 왔습니다. 현재 평양 최고급 아파트 가격은 약 20만 달러, 한국 돈으로 2억 원이 넘는 수준으로 알려져 있습니다. 북한에도 부동산 시장이 생겼고 이를 활용하는 상대적 부유층이 존재합니다. 북한 정권은 원산 갈마 지역에 관광단지를 조성하여 더 크고 높은 리조트 또 주거단지를 건설하고 있습니다. 이번 영상에서는 하와이대 치형 해리슨 킴 교수와 함께 북한 건축이 어떻게 변화해 왔는지 살펴봅니다. 건축과 건설 노동을 통해 북한 사회의 작동 원리를 연구해온 학자로서 북한 부동산 도시 건설과 건축 시장의 과거, 현재, 미래를 논의합니다.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this very special program, and it's an honor to meet you as well, Professor Beck. My name is Chiyoung Harrison Kim. I am an associate professor in the Department of History at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. My specialty is modern Korea and especially North Korean history. Looking at the history of urbanism and, of course, architecture in North Korea is a very poignant way of understanding North Korea's social structure and also its power structure, and not to mention its ideological development and, of course, its international relations as well. Once you arrive in North Korea, Pyongyang, these are the sites that you see: the statues, the tower, the infamous Ryugyong Hotel, the exquisite and enormous monuments. But the other side of Pyongyang looks like this. It is a very urban metropolis, Pyongyang is. And of course, the city of Hamong, the second largest city of North Korea today, is also a very urbanized city. And other than the monuments and the statues, the cities are filled with what you can call vernacular architecture. So monumental architecture is architecture that symbolizes the power and the hegemony of a place, but it can also symbolize things like the church or the military or even educational centers, institutions as well. Vernacular architecture are buildings, built environment that's about taking care of people's livelihood, housing, workplaces, even entire neighborhoods, including parks and so forth. After the Korean War, North Korea was an enormous place of international cooperation for reconstruction. So, for example, the Soviet Union basically rebuilt Pyongyang. East Germany was instrumental in rebuilding the city of Hamhung. Poland was a very important player in rebuilding Cheongjin and Nanam into one city. Sinuiju in the northwest, of course, the Chinese military was very influential and did a lot of work there. Bulgaria built schools and hospitals. And of course, the Soviet Union also aided in bringing equipment and technology to many factories, including the most symbolic ones like Hungnam Fertilizer, Kimchek, Supung, Pyongyang Textile, and so forth. So it is important to remember that North Korea's beginnings involves a great deal of international cooperation and solidarity that was hinged on the hierarchical landscape Soviet, the state socialist world. And after World War II, it was almost a duty for all these socialist countries to help rebuild North Korea. This was, of course, heavily emphasized by Moscow. So in the 50s, you see this kind of newspaper articles throughout the 50s and 60s, how North Korea is grateful for international help. Okay, so Pyongyang was rebuilt after the Korean War with Volgograd as a model. Not Moscow, not Berlin, but it was Volgograd. And during the period of Stalin, it was called Stalingrad. It is not a big city. It's a city of 1 million, 2 million. And Pyongyang was originally designed as a city 2 million. And by the end of 1950s, Pyongyang was a very urban city. You see the People's Army Street here that was very wide and that extended from the Pyongyang train station. The Stalin Street, very important street, and apartment buildings that rose up on East Pyongyang, rebuilt with the help of China. So by the end of the 1950s, and especially by the mid 1960s, Pyongyang and North Korea was far more urbanized than South Korea, far more. So we do see in South Korea the beginnings of planned urbanization in Seoul beginning in the 50s and 60s, apartment complexes and so forth, but not to this extent. By the time end of the 1960s, the basic structures of North Korea's urbanism was complete. Now, we can go into details like this was based on the designing of a micro district, micro rayon or soguyeong. That was the smallest unit in which neighborhoods, living spaces, and workplaces were designed together. And many soguyeong made up a urban center. One very famous soguyeong is number 87 in West Pyongyang, and today that is where the infamous Ryugyong Hotel exists. Okay, a very important practical and regulative concept was the notion of efficiency, and within that, one famous example was the 통방 panel example. 조립식 방법 통방 panel. And these were basically a rectangular block of concrete, made of concrete, and they were basically stacked on top of each other to increase efficiency and speed. So this notion of one apartment assembled in every 14 minutes became famous for becoming the Pyongyang speed. Pyongyang 속도, one apartment in every 14 minutes came from this period using one room panel part. Anyhow, so my point here is that both the monumental and vernacular sides of North Korea's architecture both contain utopian and utilitarian features. Even within vernacular forms of architecture like apartments, it had utopian notions, state being able to organize and control and shape people's livelihood through efficiency. This is a very ideological and utopian notion, of course, and even within monumental architectural forms, you see very utilitarian features where the concept and practice of bureaucracy becomes a very important way of organizing the masses. So at the heart of Pyongyang, even today, is not a house of rule, but a house of learning. Right behind the so-called the leadership podium, 주석단, in central Pyongyang, is not a government building, but a very large, grand people study house. It's a big library that is at the center of Pyongyang. People outside of North Korea don't know this quality feature very well because usually in the media, we only see the leaders standing at the podium featuring the marching of the soldiers and the missiles. But what is right behind that entire facade and the spectacle is a gigantic library and a place of learning. So that kind of embodies the initial ideology of urban planning in North Korea. Now, this does not mean that this is more democratic or more peaceful. No, that is by no means the case. So this is instead an expansion of state power and state bureaucracy. where the government is is secure, that to control the people, you need more than violence and you need more than power. And what you really need is education and learning. So this is one excellent example where the center of Pyongyang's urban planning was a house of learning. Hamong is an extremely interesting case. East Germany was involved in rebuilding the city from 54 to 1965, and they built not only the city center, but also the outskirts and the suburbs. So when you see pictures like this came up in the mid 1950s in Hamong. These buildings do not look like Korean buildings. They look more like European, Eastern European buildings. So, modern apartments in Europe for ordinary middle class people. And here's a nice photo of North Korean and East German workers together. Here's an interesting case. The Hamong Provincial House of Culture that stands today, that was finished in the 1960s, European in style, and it resembles slightly the Bauhaus building that stands in Dessau, Germany today. The Bauhaus building, which is a landmark and a symbol of the Bauhaus movement. The most symbolic place Hamong's reconstruction was the Wilhelm Pieck Avenue that runs through the center of the city, named after the first president of East Germany, Wilhelm Pieck. So here's the early models and the reconstruction process, and this is how it looks today. So many of the photos that I'm showing you are the ones that I took by myself in 2014. Now, from the 1970s and on, the memory of this incredible transnational past goes away. Incredible moment of solidarity and cooperation begins to fade away in North Korean history and in the media. And from the 1970s, you do not find articles of cooperation with foreign countries all too much in North Korean newspapers. So today, even the name of Wilhelm Pieck Avenue has been changed to Cheongsong Avenue. Okay, so 1970s and 80s was another remarkable period in North Korea's urbanism. Pyongyang became the spectacle city. It became the model city for the world to consume and to witness. And within the space, the larger context is that beginning in the late 1970s and 80s, North Korea saw itself as a vanguard of the Third World movement and of post-colonial anti-imperial movement. And the architectural boom also occurred within this context. Now, North Korea's industry until the early 80s was still thriving. Their machines were working. Their production facilities were making steel. Now, this was beginning to decline in the 80s for sure, but the building and the architectural projects had already begun, and there were some incredible monumental structures being built, like the Manggyeongdae School Children's Palace, completed in 88, Cheongyugan Restaurant along Taedong River, completed in 81, that seats 1,500 people. The famous Twin Tower Koryo Hotel, finished in 1985 before the Petronas Hotel in Kuala Lumpur with a bridge that connects the two buildings. Oh, the futuristic Bingsanguan, the ice skating rink, finished in 1981. And of course, the infamous Ryugyong Hotel that began in 87, but it took more than 20 years of completion, and it was finally completed in 2013. And today it functions as a hotel and events area. Not all the floors, it's 100 stories tall. Not all the floors are working, but we know that at least 20 or 30 stories in the middle is a functioning place. And it was completed with investment from Egypt, from United Arab Emirates, and with some Chinese investment as well. And also France. France was also a big investor. Chute Tower on the right, completed in 1981. Another important moment in the 1970s and 80s we see is this expansion of apartment buildings, apartment complexes. So Changgwang Street was a model street during this period with very modern and cosmopolitan interior spaces. Now, in the 1980s, North Korea was also very aware and keenly competing with South Korea. And of course, South Korean economy and the building boom of 1980s was an incredible story on its own. And North Korea, of course, was pressured to compete with South Korea and remake the urban structure into more of a living space, more of a, I guess, residentially friendly place, just like South Korea was doing. So we see a similar event taking place in North Korea where there's a lot of investment in apartment construction as well. But of course, when it comes to apartment construction, North Korea never reached that point where it provided enough housing for everybody. So if you're an elite person, a party member, or if you had a good job, your housing was secured. But for many people, especially in the rural area, what I understand is that provinces were left to their own means of taking care of housing. Okay, some recent examples have some recent news about North Korea have largely been about its new urban development. So today, what we can say is that this kind of new boom in urban development in North Korea is for leisure and consumption for tourists that North Korea is hoping will arrive, and of course, for the new wealthy class. And we know now that North Korea has today pretty strong upper level class that is an economic class. So wealth that has been gained through trade and markets and through investment as well. So this is a hearsay, but I heard recently that most expensive apartment unit in Pyongyang can go from $100,000 to $200,000, which is such an incredible story. I mean, so there's this side of North Korea that we see as isolated and underdeveloped and poor, but the other reality of North Korea is that they are investing a lot into urban renewed structure as well. Now, we must say that these buildings are mostly targeted for the elites. So we're talking about 1 million people, 1 or 2 million people within the boundaries of Pyongyang. Most recently, we got a very interesting dose of the latest completion, the Galma Resort Complex in Wonsan City. So this is part of Wonsan. So Galma Resort is part of the Wonsan area, and Galma is a peninsula. It's a small, beautiful peninsula. I've been there myself, and it has been a resort town for a very long time, for hundreds of years. In Korean history, Wonsan has always been known for its beauty, for its trees and the mountains and the ocean. So Wonsan naturally is this amazing merger of mountain and the ocean. And it has always been a beautiful area. And today it's turned into this, I can't say that it's beautiful, but it is surely something that resembles a very Western kind of resort style. And North Korea is hoping that this is where the new wealthy class will visit, and also tourists from Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and of course China. So I am toward the end of my presentation, but maybe I can just finish by saying that North Korea's urban areas is a very vibrant place. Most of the middle class and ordinary people, they still live in kind of old little bit worn down structures like this. This is something that I took in 2014. But the city is teeming with people. It is a vibrant place now with markets. It is a place where people go on dates, students have fun, workers and bureaucrats are walking around. So it is a truly a cosmopolitan place. Let me finish my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Yeah, I think I learned a lot about this North Korean history or genealogy of architecture. Last is 70, 80 years. And I have, plenty of questions, to ask. Let's start with this human resources. I mean, people in this in architecture and then construction in general. And who are those people who made it out this monumental architectures, and then especially those who design and an architect, of course, and then engineers are very important, and
Right.
then ordinary workers. We know that the North Korea doesn't have enough those mechanical tools to have or expedite and then those the process, but the people are there. But we know that those MG generations are quite different from the previous generation. But North Korea also have MG generation, but they have some different value systems, and it might be quite challenging for the North Korean authority to incorporate those or convince or persuade them to just work in a very difficult and hard conditions in the construction site. So what's your take?
In North Korea, construction sites from the beginning, okay, we're talking about 1945, and especially from the post-war period, and even today, much of the heavy lifting and the non-technical work is done by volunteer work.
Volunteer work.
Volunteer work. So these are students, these are soldiers, these are residents who volunteer their time on weekends, on Saturday and Sundays. These are people who organize themselves from other neighborhoods and regions, and they come gather to build and to complete a construction project. So, sometimes they're called 돌격대, especially when there's a time limit and it has to be done. And 돌격대 is often translated as shock workers.
Shock
So-
workers.
So people who come in and are able to finish a project in a relatively short time. North Korea, but also in all socialist countries, there's a history, so-called shock workers, and many of them are volunteer people, students, soldiers, and people from other areas coming in together. A big problem that North Korea still has not overcome. So of construction is done by hand. So there is heavy machinery, and North Korea has a lot of heavy machinery, but it's never enough. It's not like in South Korea or in the West. So while heavy machinery may do the big work like laying down the pipes and lifting the steel frames and so forth, but other types, majority of the work, it requires an enormous number of people. And this is when the volunteers and the students and the soldiers come in. They are compensated in a way. They're compensated with food, they're compensated with honor, and sometimes even a very small wage. But mostly these are projects that ordinary people are tasked to take on. So the very famous movie, Comrade Kim Goes Flying, 김동무는 하늘을 날다, perhaps the most famous movie, a North Korean movie that was shown outside, including South Korea, 김동무는 하늘을 날다. The story is about a young woman from the rural area. She's a coal miner, and she is very excited to go to Pyongyang to participate in a big construction project. And so we see this kind of process happening where young people from the rural areas are sent to big construction sites in order to complete a massive project. Now, so you can say that this is in many ways, a limitation of North Korea's economic power. That is, school still requires a volunteer level of work, but at the same time, one very alarming and uncomfortable part of construction work that happens throughout the world, including South Korea, whether it's the most advanced country or the poorest country, is that construction work relies upon irregular workers, day workers, irregular workers, workers who have no ties to any system, workers who have no guaranteed insurance or social service or welfare or protection. And very often with a suppressed lower wage, right? So this happens everywhere throughout the world, including South Korea, where big construction sites are completed, and they can only be completed with the help of irregular workers, and North Korea has the same phenomenon.
이처럼 북한에서 건축은 여러 의미를 지닙니다. 건설 과정에서 동원된 북한의 청년 돌격대는 노동자로서 학습한 미장 기술을 익혀 서비스업에 종사하거나 해외 건설 현장에 동원되기도 합니다. 거의 보상은 없다고 합니다. 다소간의 명예와 약간의 급여만을 제공받는 이 돌격대가 얼마나 더 유대했을지는 모르겠지만 그들의 노력은 북한의 도시 풍경을 새롭게 변하고 시키고 있는 것만은 분명해 보입니다. 한편 최근 북한은 원산과 갈마 지역에 치형킴 교수가 이야기했듯이 와이키키와 같은 리조트를 건설하면서 다양한 변화를 과시하고 있습니다. 과거 북한과 미국의 싱가포르 정상회담에서 김 위원장은 미국 트럼프 대통령에게 북한 해안가 리조트 개발을 이야기했고 트럼프 대통령은 이에 관심을 표명하기도 했죠. 트럼프 대통령은 올해 1월 취임 직후에도 김정은이 해안가에 엄청난 콘도 건설 역량을 갖고 있다고 언급해서 화제를 모으기도 했습니다. 과연 북한의 원산과 갈마는 와이키키처럼 될 수 있을까요? 아니면 북한 체제를 선정하기 위한 또 하나의 보여주기식 리조트로 남을까요? 북한의 건축은 어떻게 발전할까요? 우리가 관심을 갖고 지켜봐야 할 북한의 또 다른 한 단면입니다.